Here it is. Okay, so the first draft, the comments are good start. And I do believe that this is a good start because, I mean, I started my introduction. So, what was your research paper like before revisions? Please show me the earlier version and explain how you wrote it. My research paper without revisions was just brainstorming how it would look like. It was more of an outline, if anything. And what was your research paper like after revisions? There's nothing I really improved on. This was my research paper before the revisions, of course. Let's go find the research paper after revisions. This is the after revisions. I did have some talks with the teacher, and I revised it with her in person and during office hours as well. Unfortunately, I'm not one to record office hours without asking, and I didn't ask, so I don't really have what she told me. However, this is my research paper after revisions, and as you can see, the paper has drastically improved in my opinion. This is the second draft, and this is the third right here. So that's a pretty big improvement in my opinion. What have I learned about the writing process? I learned that sources can be used in a multi-dimensional way instead of just presenting a source by itself. What I mean by that is that sources can be compared to your own opinions or other sources, and finding any contrasting bias within the comparison of your own source or other sources. As an example, I will show you what I did in my final. At this point right here, I compare and contrast this source with another. I also learned this by looking at several newspaper articles and combining them into one short paragraph. I did this mainly because there's no scholarly articles or interviews that are made by scholarly sources or research or anything. It was made by newspapers. Mostly the people that are actually interested in subjects like this are more pop culture and trendy. So please explain the examples and how they demonstrate what you've learned. So the first example is learned after the group project with Pablo, in which I had to read about two authors, one an expert and another an amateur. I learned that the expert would compare and contrast the sources he had, and he used a small amount of sources to accomplish his goal. I also learned the perspective of the amateur, which used many more sources for one claim. This proved to be more tedious than the work of an expert writer, which in the end developed a deeper insight into the work with less sources. I will definitely apply this in the future where I have to use sources to back a claim. Scholarly articles can offer deep insight into a claim or research question, so if I have an important essay due from, let's say, a government course I'm taking this fall semester, I'll make sure to find insightful and meaningful connections and information from multiple sources. So what was my research process like before this class? Before this class, my research process was greatly influenced by History 1301, since the teacher aimed to teach us how to properly research, cite, and extract meaningful information from really old books that really didn't have any PDFs, so you couldn't search anything online for them. They're really obscure, and it honestly paid off because it helped me a lot. I, however, took a different approach and decided to begin from scratch when entering English 1302, since the methods being shown here were different from that class. My research process also would involve searching keywords in Google and trying to find the most reputable source by looking up, is this a reputable source on Google? It's probably not a good idea since many newspapers are still biased and use questionable sources themselves to back their claims. Okay, how has my research process developed? I initially began my research with Google searching successful people reading habits and clicking the first few links that I saw. This was not a good strategy as I had to combine many more resources to filter out any misleading information that could have been in these newspapers. After learning more about the research process in class, I looked into the TED website and found a good video that was related to my topic. I also learned in class. I looked into the school's library and I found a good source there as well. So I'm gonna show you the examples that I got from my for my essays. This example shows that I used the TED website to find this. So I actually linked all the websites. So this is the official TED website, and I got this video from the TED website, and I used this to add on to my essay. I mostly did this through transcript, and I annotated the timestamps that it shows right here. So if I was pulling something out from, let's say, this part, I would cite timestamp and put it next to that part. Next example would be the scholarly article, which I found with my teacher while revising my essay with her. I have found this through the research process that I've been taught, which involved using Boolean search and the UTRGV library, and this is what I found. This is what I found, and this is what I used for my essay. Next time I have to find a reputable source, I probably won't look into newspapers. Instead, I'll use something like the UTRGV library and its website, or the TED Talk website, which are very reputable sources. So what was my process for integrating or writing about sources into my writing before this class? So my process for integrating my sources into my writing before this class was sort of like the same, where I'd get a source, describe it in my essay, then explain it, and compare and contrast it with other sources in my essay, which I have described previously. How has my process for integrating sources developed? Okay, my process for integrating sources has developed more into the explaining with less sources when I realized that you don't need many sources to back a claim that is already known. It is, however, the opposite for larger claims, which require a lot more evidence to back up. So, examples of the work that I've developed in class. My first example for the integration of sources would be the Bill Gates newspapers. I didn't know how to properly integrate when I wrote this, and it shows. But when you go down to the TED Talks, you'll see that there's more integration of the source being done. I was just grabbing a bunch of sources, and instead of using my own mind to fill in the blanks, I just used a bunch of sources and filled in all the blanks that were there. This right here, this guy right here, I'm just using what he said, his personal opinion of the Bill Gates interview. Please explain the examples and how they demonstrate what you've learned. I was first learning how to integrate. You could easily tell by the early draft work with the articles for rich people. I then switched my topic to successful people, since success doesn't necessarily mean monetary wealth. As you can see here, in my third draft, that this is about rich people. I got most of this information from just reading a bunch of articles online, and then just coming up with something to write about, because I knew nothing about this subject. So this all just came out of my own head, kind of spitballing here. So how will I apply what I've learned in the future work? or learning situation. I think that after understanding how to integrate sources properly, I'd get better grades. I would usually get points off due to not integrating a source properly in a history class, and I was never taught how to integrate sources properly in 1301. Just finding the sources and citing them properly. So, what was my process for learning with my peers and or engaging in feedback before my class? So my process of learning with my peers before my class was less engaging class-wise, and it really only helped me make friends with other people. How has my process for learning with my peers developed? During English 1302, I gave and received more constructive feedback after working with other classmates and having feedback sessions with others, as well as doing these shared finals with other people where I had to pick a question or part of a reading and answer it with a group of people. It was more constructive than previous classes that I've taken. So during the semester, I worked with a classmate on a presentation where we had to answer some questions. I also helped another classmate with their homework since they were absent and they needed assistance. During this presentation, we discussed the assignments and whatnot. It brought a sense of clarity to what I should do with my work. I think that having a different perspective influence your work in a positive way is very helpful. With a classmate that needed help, I believe that teaching solidifies